Hi, my name is Emma Maxwell and I run Scottish Indexes along with my husband Graham Maxwell. We're genealogists based here in Scotland, and I want to show you today how to find out more about your ancestors, more than just the names and dates, places of birth, but how to find out the stories behind their lives. Of course, the names and dates and places are important, so we do need to start with birth, marriage and death certificates first, as well as the census. If you've not done that yet, these are available on scotlandspeople.gov.uk. But what do you do once you have that information? In our example today, we're going to use the Tate family. Here we have Gilbert Tate, and he is a cooper, and Margaret Tate, his wife, and they're living in Glasgow. One of the first things that you can do is search the newspapers. More and more of these are becoming available. We've got the British Newspaper Archive. Now, that's available as a standalone website. It's also available through Find My Past. So if you already have a Find My Past subscription, use it on there so you're not paying twice for the same thing. We've got ProQuest, Google News, and also ancestry newspapers as well. One thing to know is that if you live in Scotland, you can get free access to some of these. So if you go to the National Library of Scotland's website and you sign up, you have to live in Scotland, you can get free access to Find My Past, and that will give you access to the British Newspaper Archive. So well worth doing, particularly if you don't use that website all the time. That is a great way to get free access to those records. Now, I do use Find My Past all the time, so we've got a subscription. I do think for Scottish research, it's very good. They've got a great selection of resources, and the newspapers is something I use all the time. So, how have I used it for the Tate family? Well, I've made a broad speculative search. All I know is that they were living in Glasgow. I know when they were living, I know what their names were. So, I've just searched for Gilbert Tate. Now, if your ancestor has got a less common name, like Gilbert is quite good in Scotland in this time period, there's not as many Gilberts. And Tate, again, is a relatively common Scottish name, but it's not like Smith. So if your ancestor was John Smith, as one of mine was, then you won't be able to use this broad speculative search. But for some people, this is the place to start. Instead, you could search by the street that they lived on, or you could use their surname in combination with the street that they lived on to see if anything comes up. So what did I find about Gilbert Tate? Well, quite a number of articles came up, and it seems that there was this terrible boiler explosion in Paisley Road in 1871. Now, this is reported actually predominantly in 1872 because it happened at the very end of the year. So now I want to find out the who, what, why, when, and where. Where are the records? But we'll look at that one last. I want to find out more about this. Now, I've come across this incident because I've used the names, but now I know there was an incident, I can make more searches just finding out more about this explosion. So, what have I discovered? Well, I found out that it was William Burnett, and he was taking a boiler from Fairfield to Kingston Dock in Glasgow. And to do this, he was using a traction engine, and it was this engine that exploded. It happened on the 31st of December 1871. And sadly, a lot of people died and even more were injured. And so this was a High Court case. Now, what happened was that Gilbert Tate's house, his property, was involved in this explosion. It was damaged in some way. So they were very closely connected to this situation. And so what I want to find out now is where are the records? For this time period, you can search High Court criminal cases on our website, scottishindexes.com. I'm making a search here for William Burnett. Now, that's because he was the accused. So, what do we discover? Yes, there is indeed a High Court case relating to William Burnett. Our website is free. You can search these so you can make those speculative searches. You can follow up from the newspaper, and it is completely free to search our indexes that are online. Now, although the index is useful, we want more information. We want to look at the originals. So where are they held? Well, they're held here. They're held by the National Records of Scotland, and this is on Princes Street in Edinburgh. Now, it's free to visit their search room and access these records. So how do you do that? Every document held by the National Records of Scotland has got a unique reference. So what we've done, we've provided this on our website. All you need to do is take note of this, visit the National Records of Scotland and ask to see that record. What if you can't visit Edinburgh? What if you can't access these records yourself? Well, we also offer a research service. We can visit for you, we can find the records, we can provide you with a copy. So, is it worth it? After all, Gilbert Tate was not the accused and he wasn't one of the victims. What will we discover in these records? Well, original documents do vary, but High Court records are very, very detailed. A lot of people describe it like reading a novel. So what will this novel tell us? Well, along with the victims or the victim's family, what we see here is Margaret Darling or Tate. So that's Gilbert's wife. Within the records, we find out more about her. We see first of all Margaret's designation. This is given in legal documents to identify the person. So she is described as the wife of Gilbert Tate, and we see where she was living and that she was living in Glasgow. And then we go on to find out what she observed on the day of the accident. It tells us that her and her husband were keeping an eating house and she was residing at number 115 Paisley Road, Glasgow. Now, this is very interesting because the census didn't say she was keeping an eating house. Rather, it just said she was a cooper's wife. So we had no idea of Margaret's occupation. Margaret was a witness to what had happened, and she says, "I was standing inside of my counter in my shop, and in a moment the shop was enveloped in darkness. At first I did not know what was the cause of this, but subsequently I discovered that it was caused by a piece of a boiler of a carriage having fallen upon the roof. After a time I went to the door and saw a man lying on the side of the footpath at the outside of my shop." Here we see a diagram, which we also find in these High Court records. The engine had stopped outside Margaret's eating house, while more water was added to the boiler. Fuel was added to the furnace so that the steam could be got up to power it. It took a lot of steam to get that engine moving. Now, the eating house was made of wood, and a piece of debris hit the gable end of the building, and it just didn't stand a chance. Now, what an event for our ancestors to have gone through. So one way to discover more about our ancestors is to use the newspapers to look for clues. Start with speculative searches. Search by their name, by the street that they lived on, or by the town. See what was happening in the area at that time that they could have been involved in. Follow the clues. Use our website, scottishindexes.com, to search. You might have found a clue in the newspaper that leads to criminal records. Search on our website. Maybe you've got no idea if you have a criminal ancestor, but search in our free index and see if something comes up. All of these records will tell you so much more than just the name and just the place. They'll fill in that extra detail to see what happened during the course of your ancestors' lives.